The Divine Symphony of Human Consciousness, or Who Did Sin? An article from Charles Fillmore. In dealing with the question of sin, two propositions confront us. These propositions are the relation of man to God and man's place and responsibility in creation. We cannot intelligently consider a subject until we have agreed on a starting point that will not fail us in the conclusion. There are two ways of looking at man metaphysically. One is that he is the perfect creation of a perfect God, that he is not responsible for anything he may do. In fact, that he does not do anything of himself, but that God is all, and everything that is done, God does, and is wholly responsible for. This view of man makes him a puppet, a mere mechanical toy moved about by a superior will. It presupposes a creator and a creation, each complete in itself. In its last analysis, it is the old orthodox idea of a personal God making a personal man and putting him forth in a prepared world, where he is tempted by a manufactured devil and then punished for his verdant disobedience. Dressed in metaphysical clothing, this view appeals to a certain phase of logical reasoning, and those who refuse to accept the old-time personal aspect of the situation arrive at virtually the same conclusion by mental jugglery. They postulate a perfect God in spirit who creates a perfect man. If God is all and he is perfect, they cannot see logically where there is room for imperfection anywhere. This leaves place for not even the appearance of error. Hence that which seems to be is gravely declared a dream of error without a dreamer. In mind, they calmly deny it all away as mortal delusion and continue to strain every nerve to keep the dream going. Every true metaphysician admits that a great truth underlies this view of the matter, and that its weakness is in the conclusion drawn from the premise. This conclusion is not consistent because it does not reconcile cause and effect. It deals with cause only on the ideal plane, and not finding effect up to its standard of perfection, it declares it nothing, absolutely without source. He who accepts this idea of God unwittingly admits that man is not an essential part of being. If God is perfect in himself as abstract mind without a manifestation, man and the universe are not necessary to his completeness, and they are, therefore, superadded conditions, barnacles as it were, below the waterline of a being that is independent of them in every way. The view that meets every point that may be raised is that man is an essential factor in a grand trinity, all of which it takes to make the whole of being. In its metaphysical sense, being is composed of wisdom, will, and consciousness. It takes all of these to make what we term God, and man stands in this Godhead as will. Ideas exist eternally in wisdom. They are made manifest through will, and that manifestation is called consciousness. Thus, man being the faculty of will in the supreme Godhead, it is through him that the universe is brought into manifestation. That which is brought forth is consciousness, a thing made. Now, things made are the result of putting together different elements. All would be monotony, dead level, eternal sameness if this were not true. So, if everything were always put together just the same every time, here again would prevail a lack of interest. If the outcome of every motive and act at every step were definitely settled, existence would be without interest. There must be in the creation of worlds, or states of consciousness, an eternal liability to fall short. Thus, man is eternally at one with the Father in his divine essence as the will, but when that will is sent forth to carry out the ideals of the Father, wisdom, a condition is set up, a state of consciousness called the soul, and its outer court called the body. These are states or conditions which have been produced by the will acting in time and space, and they are subject to laws inherent in being. If the ego, or will, which is man, has faithfully adhered to its wisdom and carried out in its work the plans which are there idealized, it has created a harmonious consciousness. This is Adam in the Garden of Eden. There is perfect harmony, and man is doing his part of the divine work without friction. There are, however, many factors entering into the creation of a consciousness. The one object is enjoyment. Being manifests its possibilities for the purpose of pleasure. Pleasure is the result of bringing together in right relation the potentialities of being. The wisdom, love, and substance of mind are manifest in consciousness as intelligence, attraction, and sensation. Eve represents love, and the serpent, substance. Thus, when love comes in contact with substance, sensation is aroused in consciousness. Whoever indulges in sensation blindly, and without restraint eventually finds himself a slave and in the dungeon of sense darkness. The right relation between the factors in harmonious creation is not sustained. Discord arises, and the consciousness of something wrong. This is evil. But the good stands ever in its place, in partial eclipse though it may be, through ignorance of the will. This realm of things made, or consciousness of condition, is termed the soul. The body is the outer court of the soul and an exact representative, in form, of the ideals which are revolving in the inner realms of its domain. The planet on which we live is a type of every man's soul. The solid part is the body, the electrical currents that permeate it from center to circumference and far beyond, represent the passions and emotions of man, and the clouds are a fit symbol of the mortal thoughts that have been thrown out by the discords of unwise thinking. All these are things and are undergoing constant change. They appear to progress from lower to higher forms, which men have observed and called evolution. This perpetual change is symbolic of man's consciousness. It also is going through just such an evolutionary process as is observed in the planet. This is a phase of consciousness. The ego is building, and these states and conditions are the evidence of its handiwork. The soul that sinneth, it shall die, writes the prophet. What is this sin, and what is the death that is threatened? We have found what the soul is, also its place in the Godhead. So we have but to carry out the logical conclusion from the premise there laid down, to find what this sin must be and the consequence, or that condition termed death. If a soul is a state of consciousness in an ascending scale of realization, its sin must in some way be connected with this process. The exact meaning of the word sin is a falling short. So, we readily see that a sinning soul is one that has somewhere or in some respect failed to come up to a certain standard of achievement. The command of God to man is, "Be fruitful and multiply, and replenish the earth and subdue it, and have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the birds of the heavens, and over every living thing that moves upon the earth." These represent states of mind, and they are all contained in the consciousness of every man. Any failure on our part to exercise this dominion is a falling short, or, as the Gospels state it, a sin. The ideal man, the real self of everyone, never sinned nor in any way fell short because it is without the pale of things or conditions. So, we in essence cannot fall short or sin. It is the thing made that falls short. We are each eternally existing in the bosom of the Father as an idea, and we shall always remain there in perfectness that never grows less nor never grows more. It simply is. But is this idea self-consciousness? Does it have that identity which makes us living souls? Here is a question that makes important the consideration of the perfect ideal and its expression. If I am perfect as an abstract idea, it is virtually a state that leaves me without self-consciousness. I am all in all, but not conscious of it in its relation or comparison. Hence it is not appreciated by me. I am a perfect ideal, ever striving to express my potentialities. Without expression, I am a carpenter without tools, a mechanic without the means to put my talents to use. This is what the soul means to man. It represents what he has accomplished in carrying out his inherent possibilities. If he has reached a certain point in expressing himself, and through some perverse or mistaken act loses what he has attained, he has fallen short, he has sinned, and must be set back in the scale of achievement. He is not condemned, except it be that the disgrace of failure be so considered. But the soul does not fall short except in degree. It does not entirely miss the goal of eternal achievement because of some slight error. It may not fall short in many such failures piled high against its record in the book of life. It is a long road that we have come, from the inception of this experience, and the way has been strewn with success and defeat again and again repeated. What we have lost in one battle has been gained in another, and the average has generally been in our favor. There are sins of omission as well as sins of commission. It is a human way of looking at things to count everything as the result of some act. In the case of the healing, by Jesus, of the man born blind, as recorded in John, the Jews asked whether his condition was the result of sin on the part of himself or his parents. Jesus said neither, but that the works of God should be made manifest in him. Thus, Jesus gave testimony of man's place in the Godhead as the will, that in which the works of God are made manifest. If man fails to apprehend his mission and do the work of bringing forth that which is allotted to him, he remains in darkness. This blindness is that state of omission which prevails in every man who does not realize his place in the Godhead. We are each in the Godhead here and now, with all its powers and possibilities wrapped up in us, as the oak is wrapped up in the acorn. If we do not exercise our powers of expression, we never bring forth the giant oak. If we bury our talent in the ground of fear and negation, we are not doing the works of God. God is life, we are the living. God is wisdom, we are understanding. God is love, we are will. Unless we proceed to act, we are not among the living at all. To be an inert mass is to be virtually dead to the world of life and light. We all want to be among the living. This desire is the very center of our being, and it is this that incites the will, which we are, to action. If we fail to act when moved by the inner impulse, we drop back into the darkness of inactivity and finally lose the little light that we have. Friction produces heat and light in the mechanical world, and action produces intelligence and power in the mental world. If you fail to do that which you are moved from within as the right thing to do, you are sinning, and your soul will remain in darkness to just that degree. The only work man has to do is to manifest in himself the works of God. God will do all the works. You have merely to see that they are done. This is not work, but the merest child's play. In fact, you must first become as a little child in order to do the works of God. That is, a condition of absolute obedience and trust must be assumed, and then the Most High will pour through you his wisdom and power. Dying is the name we have given to that state of negation in man's consciousness where he can no longer retain possession of his body. This is always the result of a failure to recognize God as the source of wisdom and life. When the soul falls short in this respect, it sins, and there is a physical dissolution which is but the outer symbol of mental negation or spiritual inertia. This death, or dissolution of the body, is the second death, over the meaning of which church people have so long contended. The first death is where the consciousness has lost sight of its wisdom sphere and sunk into the belief that God is absent from man and the universe. This is being dead in trespasses and sins. There can be no other explanation of the first and second death. Metaphysically, we know that the body is the outer form of the thoughts, and it, therefore, could not die or disintegrate unless a similar process had first taken place on the mental plane. If you allow yourself to go to sleep spiritually, that is, if you live in the senses and fail to recognize your spiritual selfhood and your relation to being, you are already virtually dying or dead. The fact that you seem to live and exercise a limited consciousness on the animal plane is no evidence that you are alive, because these senses fail you ere long. They will dissolve, and you are then in the second death. Man's office in being is to make manifest its possibilities, and unless he does this in its highest degree, he is falling short or sinning. Jesus said, "I must work the works of him that sent me, while it is day. The night cometh, when no man can work. As long as I am in the world, I am the light of the world." Then he proceeded to open the eyes of the blind man. He was always about the Father's work. He recognized the importance of man in the Godhead, that he was a central faculty that must be about its appointed work. The world of every man is his consciousness, and he is the light of that world so long as he is in it. He must let his light shine if he wants to see ahead. Every man should make it his very first duty to be about the Father's business. The Father's business is your business because you are the executive department in being. To execute, you must be active. This activity must be in spirit. Spirit is your source of power, and it is there only that you will find the oil and wick to make your light. There is no other light in the world but man. Jesus said, "I am the light of the world. Ye are the light of the world. Let your light shine." And that is the end of the article.